Crunk Energy hit the market in the mid-2000s, and with rap stars like Lil Jon being the marketing face for this delicious drink, it would become a worldwide craving. From being featured in a 2006 Cat Williams comedy special known as Pimp Chronicles, which is hands down still one of my faves, to being advertised next to Bo Hagen, who was one of the faces of Southern rap in the 2000s. His track, What's Up, is still played in communities today and can't be matched. Crunk Energy would go on to have an alcoholic line known as Crunk Juice or CJ in the early 2010s that would then be banned from markets. More on that later in this video because there has been some confusion in a few articles as Lil Jon didn't advertise that side of the brand all too well. Even though Crunk Juice was popularized by Lil Jon in the 90s because of its double cup roots. Crunk Energy would see success with younger demographics as it was showcased to be a chilled and healthy alternative with markets saturated in high sugars and less grassroots. Literally, the face of Crunk Energy cans had statements about horny goat weed, which doesn't seem like a selling point for adults because most people think of devil's lettuce when go and weed are advertised. But the 2000s had been a different time for the legalization of that market, and that is a whole other discussion in itself. But after the 2010s, Crunk Energy would see a downfall on store shelves. It could only be found in southern US states like Florida. What would happen to this Lil Jon venture, and was the alcoholic side of Crunk the reason for its faded image? Crunk in itself has been around since the beginning of hip-hop and rap culture. Some people say it stands for crazy drunk or crunk, but others like me know crunk as a defining moment of the late 90s and early 2000s and is seen as a subgenre within rap. I did a bigger deep dive into this genre with my video about 3 6 Mafia, so if you want to check that out, a card will be up at the top. Lil Jon would be seen as a king of crunk around 2001 and would be the motion Crunk Energy needed as Crunk Juice, which was an underground mixed liquor of Red Bull and Hennessy at the time, could be seen next to Lil Jon in music videos as well as his name tied behind its creation. It was basically the double cup before the double cup. This type of marketing that Lil Jon would use would catch the eye of businessman Sidney Frank, who was a face of Jägermeister and Grey Goose vodka. The two would create Crunk Energy in 2004 as Lil Jon was familiar with energy drinks and Sidney had been familiar with alcohol. This joint venture would go on to spawn a successful advertising campaign that would be used in hip-hop culture. At that time, hip-hop would be the heart of pop culture, and what better way to put more of the community out there than to take to the energy drink market. Monster and Red Bull were on the rise, but were not always seen as the healthier option. This would give the Crunk brand an opportunity to have a more chilled approach with a healthy outlook towards energy. However, with the death of Sidney in 2006, by 2007, Crunk Energy would be sold to Solvi Brands, which would push Crunk into a marketable alcoholic beverage. After 2007, Crunk Energy would show the world the dominating force it had become. Through reviews that are still found on YouTube today, this energy drink would have youthful generations quoting Lil Jon's yeah phrase, yeah, after taking a sip of healthier and chill vibes. Crunk Energy would be aimed at younger demographics in its first stages. However, under the purchase with Solvi Brands, Crunk would shift to adults. In a 2007 article from BevNet, it could be stated that the next approach with Crunk under new leadership Thomas Malk would be to relocate to Roswell, Georgia. Now, in the beginning of this video, I had mentioned that Crunk had become a marketable alcoholic beverage. This move to Roswell, Georgia had launched the next chapter of the Crunk brand as Gilla Brew Co. would launch CJ or Crunk Juice without the I in juice. I bring this up as Thomas can be tied to Crunk Energy in 2007 under Solvi Brands, as he was the new CEO of the time, and with CJ in the 2010s under Gilla Brew Co. The confusion should be over with as one side of Crunk was aimed at younger consumers and the other side had been for 21 and up crowds. The two together alongside the marketing success of Lil Jon would give way to what we see now with more energy alcoholic based drinks like Four Loko and Monster. CJ would then hit the markets around the world after the 2010s and people, especially college students, could not get enough of this caffeinated malt beverage. However, this chapter for Crunk would lead to a ban, as many younger consumers were getting hurt, and ultimately its downfall would be seen after 2012. After the 2010s, we started to see more concerns about alcoholic energy drinks in the market. These concerns had been from parenting groups, as most of these brands like Four Loko did not have a big enough label that it was for 21 and up consumption. If you were a teen around this time like I was, you will remember if you knew someone who knew someone that could get you these drinks, it would boost your night and party time was on. But it wasn't just the age factor that played a role in Crunk Juice's downfall. Crunk Juice would be banned due to its higher alcoholic content levels, and college students were becoming reckless with Crunk itself. Under brands like Four Loko, which was covered in media, deaths were plagued within the alcoholic energy drink market. I mean, just take a look into Mitch Lucker, who was a pioneer in deathcore that had passed from this very thing. The banning of Crunk Juice and the bad media around these tragedies would leave Crunk as a brand to take a backseat for a few years. However, CJ would try a re-release with less alcoholic content, but the damage had been done to its reputation. The reckless care into the brand after it was sold to Salvi Brands in 2007 would lead Lil Jon to seek other marketing avenues and life ventures, and by 2017, Crunk Energy would be faded. Crunk Energy can still be found in some southern states like Florida, and even on its website you can still make an order, or you can check them out on Instagram, which doesn't have a really big following, but they seem to still have some type of marketing behind the brand with recent posts. However, that still doesn't change that Crunk Energy and Crunk Juice has faded from store shelves. I really do hope to see this brand kind of come back, but with the negative press behind it and the fact that there hasn't really been a pop culture icon like Lil Jon tied to it since the 2000s, I have to say the odds for this brand surviving next to successes like Red Bull, Rockstar, and Monster is very, very slim. Crunk Energy was a defining moment of the 2000s, and it could be seen as a leader in the market we have today with sugar-free or healthier energy drink options. You could say that it definitely had consumers screaming, "Yeah!"